Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we are digging into a really thought-provoking collection of essays. It's called Feminist Approaches to Science, and it was edited by the neurophysiologist and feminist scholar Ruth Bleier. And let me tell you, it asks some huge questions about something we take for granted, how we know what we know.
You know, we're all kind of taught to see science this way, aren't we? It's supposed to be this clean, unbiased search for facts, totally separate from the messy, complicated world of human culture.
But this book throws a major question on the table. What if science isn't separate? What if it's just like any other human institution? And what if it's shaped deeply by the beliefs and biases of the very people doing the work? Okay, let's dive into this.
So the first big idea the book puts forward is this. What if science isn't some universal objective thing? What if, for most of its history, it's been built from the ground up to reflect a very specific masculine point of view simply because of who was allowed in the room?
And there's a key word for this idea: androcentrism. Basically, it means male-centered. The argument goes like this. If an entire field is built and run almost exclusively by one group of people, and historically, in science that's been white middle-class men, then everything about it, from the theories to the language, is going to start reflecting that group's worldview.
And you can actually see this worldview pop up in the language scientists use. I mean, check out this quote from Richard Feynman's Nobel Prize speech. He's talking about his own theory, and he describes it first as a beautiful woman you fall in love with, and then later as an unattractive old lady. Now, the book argues this isn't just a metaphor. It shows a deep-seated way of thinking, where nature is seen as female, something to be understood, mastered, and controlled by a male mind.
So this historical exclusion of women, it wasn't just a question of fairness or equal opportunity. The book argues it fundamentally changed the science that got made. It affected which questions people thought were worth asking, how they interpreted the data, and it meant that when women did have huge breakthroughs, their work was often ignored or, as we're about to see, just stolen.
And the classic example of this, which the book points to, is the story of Rosalind Franklin. Her incredible images of DNA, her photo 51, were the absolute key to figuring out its structure. But her work was taken and used without her consent, and then her male colleagues went on to basically write her out of the story, framing her as just a technician who couldn't have understood the real discovery.
So how does a bias like this actually affect research? Well, the book gives us this amazing case study from the world of primatology, the study of apes and monkeys. And the argument here is that the old male-centered view didn't just tint the science. It might have caused us to misunderstand our closest animal relatives for decades.
For a long time, the stories scientists told about primates sounded a lot like old human stereotypes. You had the aggressive males battling it out for dominance, while the females were just passive prizes. The whole social structure was seen through the lens of male competition. But then in the 1970s, as more women came into the field, a totally different picture started to emerge. Suddenly, they were describing active, strategic females and realizing that female relationships were often the very backbone of the troop.
Now here's the key. It wasn't that the primates suddenly changed. It was that the scientists started noticing things that had been there the whole time. They saw females actively seeking out multiple partners, even when they weren't fertile. And the reason for this is just fascinating. It seems to be a political strategy. By making it unclear who the father is, it makes it less likely any male will harm an infant he might have fathered. All of a sudden, what looked like random behavior started to look like incredibly smart evolutionary politics.
All right, let's switch gears to another case study, this time from the really tricky field of neuroscience, and specifically the hunt for sex differences in the brain. The book uses this as a prime example of how our own cultural beliefs can get sort of laundered until they look like hard, objective science.
So the book points out this pattern it sees in a lot of this research. First, you start with an assumption that already exists in society, like a big cognitive difference between men and women. Then you go looking for the biological cause in the brain. But here's the dangerous part, step 3. Brain data is super complex. It's often ambiguous. And it's so easy when you're looking at that messy data to see the patterns you already expect to find, and to just not see the data that doesn't fit your theory.
And this gets to the heart of the critique. The book suggests that sometimes scientists can act almost like readers. They're looking at this really complicated text, a brain scan say, and they unconsciously fill in the blanks with the cultural story they already know, the one that says men and women are just wired differently. And just like that, a social belief gets a shiny scientific stamp of approval.
So, with a critique this deep, you might be wondering, is the book just trying to tear science down? And the answer is no, not at all. Instead, it tries to imagine a new vision, a more self-aware, a more rigorous, and a more socially responsible way to do science.
So what does this better science actually look like? Well, the book lays out some key ideas. It's not about getting rid of the scientific method, it's about making it better. It means you start by admitting that scientists are humans and they have biases like anyone else. It means you stop doing research that's designed to justify oppression, and, this is huge, it means you embrace complexity instead of always looking for a simple cause and effect, and you make that knowledge available to everyone. The argument, really, is that this isn't so much feminist science as it is just better, more honest science.
So in the end, the big takeaway from Bleier's work isn't about replacing an old bias with a new one. It's about seeing a really fundamental truth, that who is doing the looking profoundly shapes what gets seen. And it leaves us with this incredible, exciting question to think about. If we change the observers, if we bring new voices, new experiences, and new questions into the lab, what amazing new worlds are out there just waiting for us to discover?